Have more order, please.
This committee, under its mandate from the House of Representatives, has the responsibility of exposing and spotlighting subversive elements wherever they may exist. It is only to be expected that such elements would strive desperately to gain entry to the motion picture industry, simply because the industry offers such a tremendous weapon for education and propaganda. That communists have made such an attempt in Hollywood, and with considerable success, is already evident to this committee from its preliminary investigative work. The committee is determined that the hearing shall be fair and impartial. We have subpoenaed witnesses representing both sides of the question. All we are after are the facts.
Way of life is under attack from without and from within our national borders. I believe it is the duty of each loyal American to resist those attacks and defeat them.
I have never read Karl Marx, and I don't know the basis of communism beyond what I've picked up from hearsay. What I've heard, I don't like it, because it isn't on the level.
What is your opinion regarding communism?
Mr. Chairman, in common with millions of other men in this country in 1939 and 1940, I gave up my job to fight against a totalitarianism which was called fascism. I am quite willing to give it up again to fight against a totalitarianism called communism.
Fundamentally, I would say in opposing those people that the best thing to do is to make democracy work. In the Screen Actors Guild, we make it work by ensuring every one of a vote and by keeping our members informed. And Jefferson put it a lot better than I can, but if all the American people know all the facts, they'll never make a mistake.
I believe that any man who is a decent American and believes in the Constitution of the United States, the free enterprise system that has made this country, given its people the highest standard of living of any country on the face of the earth, I believe that man should be very proud of it, should stand up for it, and not be afraid to speak.
Any real American would be proud to answer the question, are you or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
It depends.
Any real American?
It depends on the circumstances. See, I could answer, but if I did, I'd hate myself for the more.
Leave the witness chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Dmytryk.
Lowell, are you a member of the Screenwriters Guild?
I would like to answer that question. I'll be very happy to. I believe that the reason the question is asked is to help
No.
I hear you, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
you hear me.
October 1947, 5 months after conducting preliminary closed hearings in Hollywood, the House Committee on Un-American Activities summoned the movie industry to Washington and opened its doors to the public. For the next 10 years, the House Committee would take Americans behind the scenes of their entertainment establishment to alert them to the dangers of a communist menace.
Communism in reality is not a political party. It is a way of life, an evil and malignant way of life. It reveals a condition akin to disease that spreads like an epidemic. And like an epidemic, a quarantine is necessary to keep it from infecting this nation.
The communists are red fascists.
Anti-free enterprise, anti-capitalistic.
Ideological termites have burrowed into many American industries.
If you wanted to drop the rompers and look, you'd find the hammer and sickle on the rear end, I think. I think they're cracked.
The committee's attack on the motion picture industry was the result of a struggle which had begun more than a decade before in the Hollywood and America of the 1930s.
Are you a member of the Screenwriters Guild?
Mr. Stribling, the rights of American labor to inviolably secret membership lists have been won in this country by a great cost of blood and at great cost in terms of hunger.
They say in Harlan County there are no neutrals there. You'll either be a Union man or a thug for J.H. Blair. Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
As the United States entered the 1930s, it faced a period of hope and despair. The decade preceding Pearl Harbor was a time of promise, encouraged by Roosevelt's New Deal programs. It was also a time of social upheaval. Demonstrators demanded food, housing, and unemployment insurance. The trade union movement was growing rapidly. Sit-down strikes were called. Industrial plants were idled. Management reacted by arming paid strikebreakers. By the end of the 30s, the United States had surpassed all other industrial nations in labor violence. The bloody war between management and labor climaxed in 1937. On Memorial Day, police opened fire on Republic steel strikers in Chicago, killing 10 and wounding hundreds. In Hollywood, talking pictures had revolutionized the film industry. Writers, actors, and directors came from the East Coast, bringing with them new ideas and new ideologies.
Come on, get up. I was just wiping the sweat off my face, but I got it knocked off.
Jim, why haven't you come before?
I couldn't. I was afraid to.
You could have written. It's been almost a year since you escaped.
But I haven't escaped. They're still after me. They'll always be after me. No friends, no rest, no peace.
Oh, Jim.
Keep moving, that's all that's left for me.
With United States recognition of the Soviet Union in 1933, Communist Party membership jumped dramatically, attracting creative artists, students, and direct action unionists, as well as the disaffected and the deprived. To many Americans, the Communist Party seemed the most visible force for social change. Reflecting the wave in other industries, the motion picture business became a focal point for trade unionism. Craft unions and talent guilds organized to fight for studio recognition. The studios fought back. 1936. The Spanish Civil War erupted. Supported by Hitler and Mussolini, General Francisco Franco led a revolt of army officers against the Republican government of Spain. Although the United States government refused official recognition of either side in this war, many Americans supported the Republican cause. More than 3,000 of them joined the Abraham Lincoln Battalion and shipped off to fight against Franco. The ranks of the Communist Party swelled with people opposed to Franco and the rise of fascism. 1938, with Spain lost to the fascists, Europe on the brink of all-out war, and labor unrest continuing in America. Texas Congressman Martin Dye has persuaded the House of Representatives to create an Un-American Activities Committee, with himself as chairman. Dye set his sights first on Roosevelt's WPA, in particular on that agency's Federal Theater Project. Committee member and future chairman J. Parnell Thomas called the Theater Project a hotbed for communists, one more link in the vast and unparalleled New Deal propaganda machine. The Dye's Committee probe of Hollywood, the next target, was, however, abruptly terminated.
Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
The silk and plunged headlong out of the skies into the impenetrable jungle that is Burma.
Looks like we're up a Burmese creek without any paddle.
Okay, Chuck, we'll have to swim out.
Can't do it. Wish we could. We'll have to walk.
With America's involvement in World War II, Hollywood, like the rest of the working nation, set aside its labor differences to support the effort against the Axis powers. Movie stars paraded out on national tours to promote the sale of war bonds. Writers and directors aided the Office of War Information, making propaganda films for the armed services. The studios promoted patriotism with a string of movies attacking Nazism, fascism, and anti-Semitism, and produced such pro-Soviet films as Song of Russia and Mission to Moscow.
The world-shaking crisis of our day, with Walter Huston as Ambassador Davies, reenacting for the screen the cataclysmic events which changed the entire course of human history. Behind the walls of the Kremlin, you'll learn the secret of the Russian power that smashed the Nazi tide. Behind the glitter of state receptions, you'll see Shigemitsu, von Ribbentrop, and their Axis satellites plotting to conquer the world. Even at the Russian ballet, there is intrigue and conspiracy. And at the sensational purge trials, you'll learn for the first time the whole shocking truth about the plot that set off the powder keg of the world.
So you were working out a deal?
Naturally. As representative of Germany?
Of Germany and Japan.
March 1946. In a speech delivered at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, Winston Churchill drew an iron curtain across Eastern Europe.
A shadow had fallen upon the scenes so lately lighted by the Allied victory. Nobody knows what Soviet Russia and its Communist International Organization intends to do in the immediate future.
President Truman had already instituted loyalty checks. 308 federal employees had been fired as security risks. The Cold War was on. With the end of World War II, labor activity returned to the home front. In early 1945, even before the war ended, Hollywood was shaken by one of the most violent labor disputes in American history. The two major union organizations clashed in a jurisdictional struggle that lasted more than 2 years. At the height of the chaos, the sides were drawn. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, backed by the motion picture studios, took up the anti-communist cause. Strikebreakers were employed. Picket lines were crossed. The Warner Brothers intensified the conflict by urging police to use tear gas and fire hoses to disperse the strikers. Violence and mass arrests continued into 1947, when the strikes turned the House Committee's attention once again to the movie industry. In May of 1947, committee investigators came to Hollywood to determine the extent of communist infiltration of the labor movement. In October, the hearings began.
How did the committee first get interested in investigating Hollywood?
Well, this is more or less a request by the people in Hollywood who had personal knowledge of, you might say, communist infiltration into various craft unions. And they were concerned about this infiltration and the influence the Communist Party would have in Hollywood.
We want to know what strategic positions in the industry have been captured by these elements, whose loyalty is pledged in word and deed to the interests of a foreign power.
20 witnesses supporting the committee's investigation testified in a week of open hearings. Many were members of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, which had supported studio management during the strikes. The Alliance had long fought the growing image of a left-wing Hollywood.
I am here to defend the industry that I have spent a greater part of my life in. I am not here to, I am here to defend the producers and the motion picture industry.
What have you heard from Hollywood as to the feeling on the part of the producers about producing anti-communist films?
Well, I heard that we're going to, I believe that would be an incredible success, and if the first picture was made, I think it would follow, as we do in Hollywood, that there would be many, many, many more made. I think it would be a very wonderful thing to see one made. I would like to see a picture of the Bulgarian situation.
I would like to see that shown to the American public so they would see how communism works. I would like to see the brutal beatings, the stabbings, the killings, the shootings.
I am proud of the motion picture industry. I am proud of its record in war and peace. With press and radio, it shares today a solemn trust to preserve our sacred freedom of speech and fight with our every energy any attempt to use that freedom as a cloak for subversive assassins of liberty. I'm just hopeful, like I told you, Mr. Smith, in California, that perhaps out of this hearing, our Congress, recommended by this committee, will have legislation, there can be no question, to give us a policy how to handle American citizens who don't deserve to be, if they are communists, to get them out of our place.
I would suggest that the Congress of the United States immediately enact such legislation as will preserve the Bill of Rights to the people for whom it was designed. That precious bill was never intended to protect enemy agents, saboteurs, and spies, whether they're American or alien-born.
We didn't get the Bill of Rights in order to protect prisoner. And I think if we're going to spend $12 billion, or whatever it is, to contain the communists in Greece, that we ought to spend at least a couple of bucks over here and do something about that. What good is it doing it over there and not getting rid of it here? They use the techniques of character assassination, and if they ever get control of the screen or of the country, it won't be just the characters they'll assassinate.
Well, I feel that they really ought to be smoked out and shown up for what they are, so that all the good free causes in this country, all the liberalisms that really are American, can go out without this taint of communism.
Had it not been for the communist activities in the motion picture studio unions, there would have been no strikes. And the violence, as I said, there's an official report here which said that much of the violence was from the direct result of communist infiltration.
Well, from your own opinion, would you say that the violence on the picket lines was due to the communists on the picket lines?
Much of it, yes.
Yes, sir. I can name a few who seem to sort of disrupt things once in a while, whether or not they're communists, I don't know.
Would you name those for the committee, please?
Well, the one chap I'm thinking of currently is Mr. Howard de Silva. Always seems to have something to say at the wrong time. Well, I know several writers, in the motion picture business who are reputedly fellow travelers or possibly communists. I don't know about that.
You have no personal knowledge of it yourself.
I know one gentleman employed at studio at which I'm employed, Mr. Lester Cole, who is reputedly a communist. I wouldn't know, personally.
What is your present occupation?
An actor.
How do you believe the principal medium is that they use Hollywood or the industry to inject propaganda?
Well, it is done through word of mouth, and
Can you speak louder, please, Mr. Cooper?
I believe it's done through word of mouth and through the medium of pamphleting and writers, I suppose.
I am happy to speak openly and honestly in an inquiry which has for its purpose the reaffirmation of American ideals and democratic processes. As last May, when I appeared before a subcommittee of this group in Los Angeles, my testimony is based on personal opinions, impressions, and beliefs created by the things I have read, heard, and seen. It is given freely and voluntarily. Ideological terms, termites have burrowed into many American industries, organizations, and societies. Wherever they may be, I say, let us dig them out and get rid of them. My brothers and I will be happy to subscribe generously to a pest removal fund. We are willing to establish such a fund to ship to Russia the people who don't like our American system of government and prefer the communistic system to ours. Subversive germs breed in dark corners. Let's get light into those corners. That, I believe, is the purpose of this hearing, and I am happy to have had the opportunity to testify.
19 new witnesses were subpoenaed. Only 11 were called to testify. The first 10 refused to cooperate with the committee and became known as the Hollywood 10. The 11th, Bertolt Brecht, denied membership in the Communist Party, left the caucus room and then the country. All but one of the 10 were members of the Screenwriters Guild, which Chairman Thomas had earlier contended was lousy with communists.
The committee had obtained a number of Communist Party cards identifying the Hollywood 10 as being members of the Communist Party. The chief investigator for the committee, Lewis Russell, a former FBI agent, presented these in evidence at the hearing regarding these 10 individuals.
Now, do these cards actually have the names of the 10 on them?
No, the cards themselves had aliases on them. And accompanying the cards, we obtained a master code sheet. And like, say, one card would have the name John Doe on it. Well, the code sheet would reveal, which was kept in Communist Party headquarters, that this was actually Dalton Trumbo or someone other involved in the Hollywood 10.
The Hollywood 10, I don't know how they selected them. They must have used a, they must have drawn them out of a hat, because some of them were very dear friends of years standing, and some were comparatively new acquaintances. Some, as in any 10, were very fond of each other, and others, as in any group of men, were not so fond of each other. They were united by the common political purpose which had brought them together.
When we got together with attorneys, the attorneys pointed something out to us that was of crucial importance, namely that the composition of the Supreme Court was such that if there were any people who were willing to test the constitutionality of the law that had created this committee, that group was likely to win, and therefore the committee would be abolished by the courts. And we had not asked for our subpoenas, but having been given them and having been commanded to go to Washington to testify, we took a common decision that we would oppose this committee and that we would try and destroy it legally in the courts. But the only way we could do that was to take a position on the First Amendment, and if the committee asked us any questions that we felt were in violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution, we would refuse to answer them.
Someone suggested at that time that we should also take the Fifth Amendment, but we rejected this. We felt that this was not a time for that, that we had done nothing wrong, that we were guilty of nothing, and this was an opportunity really to clear away the anti-Semitism which had come, the Cold War atmosphere which was growing so fast. That we had a real mission at this point, and we felt confident that we could make it, because there's no question about, in anybody's mind, there wasn't then, and there isn't now in my mind, that our stand was justified, we were guilty of nothing, and this was a position that we had to take.
We had originally bound ourselves to the unanimity rule, and they didn't want us to testify.
You mean that you would all take the same
position? We would all take the same stand, or that we would all agree. This is an odd rule, but it happens in these kind of cases, in these kind of organizations, where the decision must be unanimous. If one person is against it, everything goes. So it's not the rule of the majority by any means. Mm-hmm. And of course, they didn't want us to do that. They didn't want us to testify because it would break the front. And at that time, I wasn't a communist, and I had gotten out of the party, and Adrian had too at the time. But we decided, we were with the people. We didn't want to break the front, and so we kept to the rules.
The men were all interested in saving their careers if they could. They were interested in making this a political issue around which they could get the support of the industry and of people generally. And it was felt that they had the best chance of saving their careers and of making this a political issue that people would support by relying on the First Amendment. So for all of these reasons, but primarily because their objective was to destroy the committee, it was decided to rely on the First Amendment. One last thing, it was believed at that time that they could win.
The morale of the Hollywood 10 was high as they came to Washington to face the committee. From within the film industry came a support group, the Committee for the First Amendment. Fearing censorship and witch hunting, celebrities such as Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, and Danny Kaye traveled to Washington to monitor the hearings and make public their support for the position of the Hollywood 10. Attorneys Robert Kenney and Bartley Crum explained that position to the House Committee.
We think two additional evidences of the illegality of this committee came out. One, in attempts by members of the committee to dictate to various producers the content of films that are to be produced. And second, an effort indicated by questioning to induce the motion picture producers to create a blacklist to hire men not on the basis of ability but on the basis of political belief. Now both of these, we say, indicate an unconstitutional purpose, a purpose to invade the domain protected by the First Amendment, which is the provision that Congress shall pass no law invading the freedom of speech or of conscience. The committee has this opportunity at this time to consider the basic constitutional principles under which it is proceeding. And I think it would be the first time that this committee ever has done that. And I think that if we are given that opportunity, the committee might well rule with this, if they can hear our arguments out and give them full consideration.
This is the unanimous decision of this subcommittee. No committee of Congress has the right to establish its own legality or constitutionality. A committee of Congress cannot disqualify itself from the provisions of the law. We operate under Public Law 601. We cannot set aside this law to suit the convenience of certain witnesses or their counsel. As a former Attorney General of the state of California, you certainly know that your remedy, if any, is in the courts. Mr. Stripling, the next witness.
John Howard, Lawson. Mr. Chairman, may I request the right of cross-examination? We ask you to bring back and permit us to cross-examine the witnesses Adolph Menzies, Fred Niblo, John Charles Moffat, Richard McCauley, Rupert Hughes, Sam Wood, Ann Rand, James K. McGinnis.
You don't have to name any more. That request is denied.
In order to show that these witnesses lied.
That request is denied. Mr. Stripling, the first witness.
John Howard, Lawson.
The question of communism is in no way related to this inquiry, which is an attempt to get control of the screen and to invade the basic rights of American citizens in all fields. The question here relates not only to the question of my membership in any political organization, but this committee is attempting to establish the right, which is historically denied to any committee of this sort, to invade the rights and privileges and immunities of American citizens, whether they be Protestant or Methodist or Jewish or Catholic, in order that you can then smear the motion picture industry and you can proceed from that to the press, to any form of communication in this country.
You have learned your lines well.
The Bill of Rights was established precisely to prevent the operation of any committee which could invade the basic rights of Americans. Now, if you want to know...
Mr. Chairman, the witness not answering the question I submitted.
If you want to know about the perjury that has been committed here and the perjury that is planned, you permit us to cross-examine these witnesses and we'll show up the whole tissue of lies.
We're going to get the answer to that question if we have to stay here for a week. Are you a member of the Communist Party? Or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
It's unfortunate and tragic that I have to teach this committee the basic principles of Americanism.
That's not the question. The question is, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
I'm framing my answer in the only way in which any American citizen can frame his answer to a question which invades his, absolutely invades
Then
his
you
right.
denied, you refused to answer that question. Is that correct?
I have told you that I will offer my beliefs, my affiliations, and everything else to the American public, and they will know where I stand, as they do from what I have written.
Stand away from the stand.
I have written for Americanism for many years, and I shall
Stand
continue
away from the stand.
to fight for the Bill of Rights, which you are trying to
Take
destroy.
this man away from the stand. Demonstrations. John Howard Lawson refused to answer the question, are you a member of the Communist Party? Or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? And other questions. He is attempting to thwart the hearings and investigations of this committee. Therefore, it is the unanimous opinion of this subcommittee that John Howard Lawson is in contempt of Congress.
Excuse the witness. No, just a moment, Mr. Chairman. Just a moment. I have other questions which I... No, he isn't. Just a moment. I have some other questions, Mr. Trumbo, I'd like to ask you. Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
Chairman, first I should like to know whether the quality of my last answer was acceptable, since I am still on the stand.
This had nothing to do with your last answer or the last question. This is a new question now.
I see. Mr. Stripling, you must have some reason for asking me this question.
You can address the committee.
You do. I understand that the members of the press have been given an alleged Communist Party card belonging to me. Is that true?
No, that's not true.
You're not asking the question.
I was.
The chief investigator's asking the
I beg
question.
your pardon,
Now, are you or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
I believe I have the right to be confronted with any evidence which supports this question. I should like to see what you have.
Oh, well, you would.
Yes.
Well, you will pretty soon.
Mr. Maltz, are you a member of the Communist Party? Next, you are going to ask what my religious beliefs are, and you are going to insist before various members of the industry that since you don't like my religious beliefs, I should not work in that industry.
Mr. Maltz.
Any such question is quite irrelevant to the course of this committee's investigation. Mr. Maltz, I repeat the question. Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? I have answered the question, Mr. Quisling. I am sorry. Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
Mr. Stripling and gentlemen of the committee, unless it has been changed since yesterday, in our country we have a secret ballot. And I do not believe this committee has any more right to inquire into my political affiliations than I believe that an election official has the right to go into the voting booth and examine the ballot which has been marked by the voter.
Are you a member of the Screenwriters Guild?
I wish to reply to that question by saying that this involves a serious question of conscience for me.
Conscience?
Conscience, sir. Conscience. Kindly let me answer the question. I am asking this as a citizen and taxpayer of representatives of my government. To let me answer the question conscientiously. I say you do raise a serious question of conscience for me when you ask me to act in concert with you to override the Constitution.
I have been advised that there is a question of constitutional rights involved here. The Constitution does not ask that such a question be answered in the way that Mr. Stripling wants it answered. I think that what organizations I belong to, what I think, even what I say, cannot be questioned by this committee.
Then you refuse to answer the question?
I do not refuse to answer. I answered it in my own way. I do not think you...
whether or not you member of the Communist Party, or whether you
I
have a word
by saying I do not think you have the right under the Constitution to ask me such a question.
Mr. Chairman, it's apparent that the witness is pursuing the same line as the other witnesses. And Mr. Scott, could you tell the committee whether or not you are now, have ever been a member of the Communist Party?
Mr. Stripling, that question is designed to inquire into my personal and private life. I don't think it is pertinent to this, I don't think it's a proper question either.
Do you decline to answer the question, Mr. Scott?
I believe that question also invades my right as a citizen. I believe it also invades the First Amendment. I believe that I should not engage in any conspiracy with you to invade the First Amendment.
Mr. Lardner, the charge has been made before this committee that the Screenwriters Guild, of which, according to the record, you are a member, whether you admit it or not, had a number of individuals in it who are members of the Communist Party.
You're trying to discredit the Screenwriters Guild through me and the motion picture industry through the Screenwriters Guild and the whole practice of freedom of expression.
If you and others are members of the Communist Party, you're the ones who are discrediting the Screenwriters Guild.
You're an American, aren't you?
Yes, I certainly am.
Well, then an American ought to be very proud to answer that question.
I'm very proud to answer the question, and I will at times when I feel it's proper.
It would be very easy to answer, too.
It's very simple to answer the question, and at times when I feel it's proper, I will. But when I wish to stand on my right
determine when
of
it's
association,
proper.
No, sir, I feel that I must determine as well.
We'll determine when it's proper. You're excused.
Next question, Mr. Stripling. Mr. Bieberman, are you a member of the Screenwriters Guild, or have you ever been a member of the Screenwriters Guild?
Now, Mr. Stripling, I would like to reply to this very quietly, Mr. Chairman also. If I will not be interrupted, I will attempt to give you a full answer to this question. It has become very clear to me that the real purpose of this investigation...
That is not...
of the motion picture industry.
Ask him the next question. Ask him the next question. Mr. Bieberman. Ask him the next question. Mr. Bieberman. Go ahead, ask him. Mr. Bieberman. Are you a member of the Communist Party, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Are you a member of the Communist Party? Are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
It is perfectly clear to me, gentlemen, that if you continue in this particular
Mr. Chairman, will you direct the witness to answer that question?
You must answer the question. And that is to cause strife in the industry.
You're excused.
Chaos in the industry.
Will you direct the witness to answer that question, Mr. Chairman, before he leaves his stand?
I have not refused to answer the question. I told you before I will answer this question
now, Mr.
fully.
Bieberman,
your purpose is to use this to disrupt the motion picture industry, to invade the right not only of me, but of the producers, to their thoughts, to their opinions. And this I will not permit.
We must have order in these chambers.
On November 25th, 1947, the same day, the House of Representatives overwhelmingly voted contempt citations for the Hollywood 10. The top executives and producers of all the major film companies met at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. The meeting was called by Eric Johnston, head of the Motion Picture Association, to decide what to do about the Hollywood 10.
We will forthwith discharge or suspend without compensation those in our employ, and we will not re-employ any of the 10 until such time as he is acquitted or has purged himself of contempt and declares under oath that he is not a communist. We will not knowingly employ a communist or a member of any party or group which advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States by force or by any illegal or unconstitutional methods. We request Congress to enact legislation to assist American industry to rid itself of subversive, disloyal elements. Nothing subversive or un-American has appeared on the screen.
As soon as they made up their minds on a clear-cut policy, which was a reversal of the policy we had been assured in Washington by Eric Johnston himself, that is, that they would never permit a blacklist, as soon as they decided there should be a blacklist, and starting with the 10 of us, support began to fall away. I don't know what pressures were, how direct the pressures were that were exerted on various actors and directors and so on in the industry, but I think they could pretty well see it without anybody saying it directly to them, that their own careers were threatened by any open defiance of the official position. See, up until that meeting, we were able to at least think of it as a fight of the movie business against this investigating committee. But as of that day in November, it became the committee plus the controlling bodies of the movie companies against us and people who supported us. and all the people in the middle felt pressure to take a stand one way or the other, and most of them took the stand of supporting the studio position or just remaining silent. I had been aware that the axe was about to fall, although I'd been told that Darrell Zanuck had said he would not execute this Waldorf resolution unless he was specifically instructed to by the 20th Century Fox Board of Directors. He didn't accept the executive meeting at the Waldorf. But meanwhile, the 20th Century Fox Board of Directors obliged him. They had asked me to undertake a new assignment after the hearings, and it was with Otto Preminger, and we were discussing the story that I'd been working on for 10 days or something in his office.
And my secretary came in and said, Mr. Zanuck, who was the head of the studio, wants to see Mr. Lardner. And I assumed it was about the film. And I said, and me? She said, no, only Mr. Lardner. Lardner left, and 3 minutes later he came back and said, I've just been fired. And the fear, it is very difficult to even remember this now, to realize it, that particularly in Hollywood, the fear was so terrible that when I went out with Mr. and Mrs. Lardner to dinner, to a restaurant, I was called by several friends the next day and said, if you have to see him, don't go to a restaurant, don't go out in public.
Was there any time between 1947 and the time that you went to jail that you wished that you hadn't taken the position that you did?
No. No, I don't recollect ever regretting it or even seriously considering what else I could have done.
I was disillusioned is the common word long before I went to prison. Not immediately, I must say, but, well, I was. I think it started actually with John Howard Lawson's, I'm sorry. I think it started with John Howard Lawson's appearance on the stand, because I realized then that our cause was lost. The minute I saw his attitude, I said, we're dead. As a matter of fact, Doris Sherry was sitting alongside of me in the audience, and I said, we're dead. And that's exactly the way I felt about it. But it took a long time for me to put everything together, but I had put it together long before I went to prison. However, I knew that if I had suddenly recanted and said, I want to purge myself, or I'm not with them any longer in spirit or in principle or in anything else, people would have said he's afraid of going to jail. And he's doing it simply because he's a coward and doesn't want to go to jail. So I knew I had to go to jail, at least show them that wasn't what was motivating me, and which I did.
The penalty that we might suffer if we lost was 1 year, and that did not seem like such an extreme chance to take in view of the fact that in the analysis of our attorneys, we would win the case, because they felt that the Supreme Court, as constituted at that time, would support our position by a 5-4 or a better majority.
We did not foresee what was going to happen as the Cold War developed. We did not foresee the fact that before the case got to the Supreme Court, 2 of the liberal justices died and were replaced by very conservative justices. So actually, at the time that this position was taken, it was realistic to say that we could reasonably expect to win.
If we had won, I think there would have been no such thing as the so-called McCarthy era, because McCarthy's committee and the other committees of the Senate behaved in precisely the same way as the House committee. And they existed on the basis of the same type of legislation. So that if we had destroyed one, McCarthy never would have been able to operate the way he did. Now, we would not have changed the Cold War, which was the political background within which all of these committees were operating. But we would have killed the ability of these committees to summon people up before them, to have false accusations made against them in many instances, or to ask them a question and not allow them to answer anything but yes or no, and then to use the weapon of job blacklist.
Contempt was recommended by the committee. It was voted by the House, tried before a judge and jury, and we were convicted. Only 2 people stood trial. Jack Lawson stood trial first, and then I. The other 8, for one thing because of money, and for another thing because of time, stipulated that the result of our cases would apply to them also. Both Jack and I were adjudged guilty of contempt of the 83rd Congress, I think it was. And as far as I am concerned, it was a completely just verdict. I had contempt for that Congress and have had contempt for several since. And on the basis of guilt or innocence, I really could never complain very much. That this was a crime or a misdemeanor was the complaint, my complaint.
We don't like the idea of going to prison. Our personal lives, our families, our work are as important to us as to anyone else. To explain to a child of 7, 10, or 12 why his father must go to prison, no, it's not easy.
Why didn't we avoid all this? Why didn't we answer the questions yes or no as the committee demanded? Because we wanted to challenge the right of the committee to ask such questions.
Whose words are these? You know? No official, high or petty, may prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, or other matters of opinion, or force citizens to confess by word or act their faith therein. Supreme Court Justice Jackson wrote this. This was the law of the land until April 10th, 1950.
On that day, by its refusal to hear our case, the court washed its hands of the rights of the American people. Our rights, your rights. And sitting in silence on the bench was the same Mr. Justice Jackson.
When we appeared before J. Parnell Thomas and his committee, we thought the Constitution guaranteed the rights of everyone. We believed the Supreme Court would certainly stand behind its own decisions. Well, we were mistaken.
The committee is now free to operate, to drag before it 1,000 people, or the million it boasts it has on its list. How are you going to answer the committee's questions?
You can't refuse to answer yes or no. That's contempt. It means a prison sentence for you, just as it does for us.
Suppose you answer yes. How will it look smeared all over the front pages of your hometown newspaper? And what'll happen to your job?
But that's not all. You answer yes, I was at such and such a meeting. Or yes, I'm a member of that organization.
Is that the end? The next question is, who else was there? Who else is a member? We want names, places, people. You want to keep out of trouble? Then become a stool pigeon.
Yes, government by stool pigeon.
Everybody investigating everybody else. And for this, on April 24th, 1950, President Truman claimed credit.
Boasting in a public speech that his administration had convicted citizens of contempt for refusing to testify before congressional committees.
In 1859, Abraham Lincoln said, "The people are the rightful masters of the Congresses and the courts."
We believe this. And for asserting that belief before a congressional committee, 10 of us are going to prison. Casualties of the Cold War. How many more will there be?
There need be no more. That depends on you. Truly, it depends on you.
We thought we'd win. Every law review in the country thought we would win. The best lawyers in the country thought we would win. Now, we didn't win. Others saw something that we had not had the advantage of seeing. they saw 10 men sell their houses, say goodbye to their kids, and go off to jail, lose their jobs, theoretically permanently, and go off to jail, and be subjected to public disgrace and punishment.
Do you think you would have done differently if you knew it was going to turn out that way?
I don't know. And I don't think that anyone knows. God knows it's hard enough for me to predict what I'm going to do, you know, in an ordinary event, in the ordinary course circumstances. I hope I wouldn't have. And I think probably I would not have. But I really can't say more than probably, because you don't know. I had 3 children. I had a nice wife. Why should I go to jail? But 200 other people knew what was going to happen. And the man knocked on the door and you got that pink slip. What the first thing you did was go out and try to sell your house before anybody discovers, so you can at least get a fair price for it, or as fair as possible. Don't let anybody know. Keep it quiet. Get as much work as you can in before it's public, it becomes public. Save every penny you have, sell what assets you have, and get ready to become nobody.
In 1951, the House Committee on Un-American Activities prepared for a new round of Washington hearings. J. Parnell Thomas had been removed as chairman after taking the Fifth Amendment before a grand jury charging him with conspiracy to defraud the government by padding his payroll. The New Jersey Republican was tried, convicted, and sent to the federal prison at Danbury, Connecticut, where his fellow inmates included Ring Lardner Jr. and Lester Cole, 2 of the Hollywood 10. By the end of 1950, Congress had passed the McCarran Internal Security Act, requiring registration of all communist and left-wing organizations. Senator Hubert Humphrey added a clause to the act calling for the setup of emergency detention camps. The Democratic administration had been accused of losing China to the communists, and by the end of the summer of 1951, there were 3 million dead in the Korean War, including nearly 20,000 Americans. In Hollywood, fear of industry reprisal had ended organized opposition to the House Committee. The studios, reflecting the national political climate, made nearly 50 anti-communist motion pictures, such as I Was a Communist for the FBI, The Iron Curtain, Big Jim McLean, and The Red Menace.
The introduction of Bill Jones to communist strategy. A misguided young man, fallen under the spell of Marxian hatred and revenge, unaware that he is only the tool of men who would destroy his country. The signs didn't tell of the worldwide Marxist racket intent on spreading dissension and treason.
Give these to the GIs over there. Yeah, Jack.
Right.
There he is! That's the guy that got our money! Get it, boys! Let's see some action! Show what we're here for! They can't steal our money and get away with it! We ought to rush the place! Let's break up the joint! Let's pull down them signs! Come on, get on the place! Break it down! Break it down, boy! That's showing up! Go on, throw that there! Break it! Boys, nice! Get rid of these.
Huh?
take my arm and start walking.
Okay.
Come on. Let's go. All right, break it up now. Come on, clear the sidewalk.
It's supposed to be a free country.
It wouldn't be if you kind had their way. Come on, let's go.
The Motion Picture Industry Council reaffirms its consistent opposition to communism, its works, its members, its methods. It wants to emphasize that, with the overwhelming majority of the American people, it believes that a clear and present danger to our nation exists. We are hopeful that through and as a result of the hearings of your committee, ways and means will be provided which will enable the nation to fairly, legally, and effectively deal with the problems of communist or subversive elements.
On March 21st, 1951, with the Hollywood 10 still in prison, actor Larry Parks became the first former Hollywood communist to cooperate with the House Committee on Un-American Activities.
In 1941, being a member of the Communist Party fulfilled certain needs of a young man that was liberal in thought, who was for the underprivileged, the underdog. My career has been ruined because of this. Don't present me with the choice of either being in contempt of this committee and going to jail, or forcing me to crawl through the mud to be an informer. I beg you not to force me to do this.
Fearing job blacklisting, Parks admitted party membership and reluctantly named names. His film career was over. Actors Howard De Silva and Gale Sondergaard followed Parks to the witness stand and stood on their Fifth Amendment rights. Their careers also came to a sudden halt.
We had searched through our files of people who've been active in the so-called left-wing movement, both in front organizations and also in the Communist Party. And dossiers were made on all these people. And then we talked to people in Hollywood who had knowledge, personal knowledge of these individuals and their activities, and particularly in union meetings and other type of meetings, fundraising meetings, and so on and so forth. And in talking to these people personally, they could almost pinpoint who was not active anymore, and also give you a good verbal account of what their activity was in unions, that they weren't participating with the Communist Party group. And so on the basis of that, a number of subpoenas were issued on, to bring these people before the committee to ascertain membership in the Communist Party.
Were you a member of the Communist Party?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Hiram Sherman was a very dear friend of mine, an actor, and we were both members of Actors Equity Association, and during the time that all this difficulty occurred, people were throwing all kinds of accusations and reactionary people in an equity meeting once hurled an accusation at lovely chubby Sherman, Hiram Sherman. They said, are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? And Chubby thought for a moment, and then he said, we're not allowed to tell. I remember that as being the most marvelous answer to that. My answer? The Bill of Rights commands me to reserve that information as part of my own principal position. If I wish to disclose it, to disclose it. If I don't, not to. I believe that in order to preserve the Bill of Rights, you have to maintain it.
And one morning, my young son, what was he then, 4 or 5, something like that, came up, running up the front steps of our house and said, Mom, somebody wants to see you. So I came down the steps, and here was this man. Well, I don't think I'll attempt to describe him, but he had a piece of big paper, and he said, Miss Sondergaard, this is for you. And this was my subpoena. The father is just out of jail. There was no point in a mother leaving the small children also to go to jail. But it seemed to me sensible for me now to be allowed to stay home with my children. And I felt that I would rather invoke the Fifth Amendment, which was a protection. Anybody can. Has no onus upon it at all, as we all know.
Over the next 5 years, hundreds of witnesses were subpoenaed. Many refused to cooperate, including actors Will Geer and Zero Mostel, and writers Lillian Hellman and Arthur Miller. Many others cooperated with the committee, among them director Elia Kazan, actor Lloyd Bridges, writers Bud Schulberg and Clifford Odets, and director Edward Dmytryk, one of the original Hollywood 10. And so began the era of the Blacklist.
Along with other people, I signed the Stockholm Peace Appeal. I believe in peace as everybody does. I at least hope that they were sincere. However, the Korean War made me realize that they were not. Any intelligent man realized that the North Koreans would not attack South Korea, would not be aggressors, unless they had the backing of very strong forces behind them.
In my own way, I tried what Larry Parks tried unsuccessfully in front of Congress. I made statements that I had been a communist. I was no longer a communist. I was no longer sympathetic with communist ideology, as it were, or their aims, and hoped this would enable me to get a job. It didn't. Being originally Canadian, it would have been a very simple thing for me to renounce my American citizenship. My family is, however, American. They love it here. I love it here. I love this country. I didn't want to be a martyr for a cause I didn't believe in, number one. And number two, as I say, I wanted to work here rather than work in Europe, where I could have with great success.
In the first place, I had never heard before '47 anybody say that they would refuse to fight for this country in a war against Soviet Russia. This, too, troubled me tremendously and has made me realize that there is a communist menace.
2 nights later, the opening of class at the workers' school finds Bill Jones and other party recruits studying Marxism, its principles, strategy, and tactics. Nina Petrovka, chosen for the introductory lecture because of her charm and personality, explains the basis of communism. It teaches that man and his world are the product of natural forces that are constantly changing. There are no positive values, no eternal principles of right and wrong. Actually, it is the old doctrine of atheism, sugar-coated with highbrow terms. It says that men are not responsible to anyone except the totalitarian socialist state. And yet the American communists deny that they want to overthrow our government by force.
The same day Larry Parks testified, Aldrich Hiss went to prison, convicted of perjury in Congressman Richard Nixon's State Department espionage case. 2 weeks later, on April 5th, 1951, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were sentenced to die in the electric chair, convicted of channeling atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. In the fall of 1951, Georgia Democrat John S. Wood, now chairman of the committee, moved the hearings from Washington back to Hollywood. One of the first witnesses called to these public sessions was screenwriter Leo Townsend.
When did you first come out to California?
I came out here in 1935. I was sent out by Dell Publishing Company to be the Hollywood editor of one of their magazines. It was a fan magazine called Modern Screen. In those days, the fan magazines weren't as trashy as they are now. I was brought up very strict Irish Catholic. After I went to college, I drifted away from the church. Somewhere innately, I wanted to get back into some kind of an organization that had rules, and it might have subconsciously been part of the reason I joined. After I was in the party, what I found that it was much stricter than the church, and I realized I got back into what I had left. And that was that started my thinking about going out. I felt, since I knew the evils of this party, what who better to talk to than an arm of our government? That I didn't know where else to go. And finally, in 1950, I called the FBI. they told me that the House Committee would be coming out, that I would undoubtedly be tapped, and I said, well, I'll volunteer. I was called by Mr. Bill Wheeler, who was the investigator of the committee, and gave me an opportunity to do whatever I wanted, take the Fifth Amendment or refuse to cooperate, whatever. And I said, no, I had thought the thing through, and as I told you earlier, my reasons, and I was willing to I thought I was, in my mind, I was doing it out of the dictates of my conscience.
Right. Can you tell us why you named so many people?
They knew every person I was associated with in the party. They said, therefore, you can't name some and not name the others. And I said, but you have them all. And again, they said it was a legality that if you're going to name the people, you must name all the ones we knew you were associated with.
Did you feel that all the people you named were all dangerous people?
No. I'm sure some were no more dangerous than I was. But I imagine within that whole group there might have been 5 or 6 people who in a crisis might be influenced because of their membership in the party to commit an act, possibly not of violence, but an act against our country. I would say 5 or 6, but I would have no idea who those 5 or 6 might be, except I knew that I wouldn't be one of them. That was one of the reasons for my willingness to tell the names.
By now, Senator Joseph McCarthy had jumped aboard the anti-communist bandwagon, first attacking the State Department and then the United States Army.
I can't help but be somewhat amused. I would be if it weren't so tragic. When I hear the Bleeding Hearts talk about the destruction of Army morale, because a chairman of a committee wants to find out from a general why he has given an honorable discharge and special favors of communists. My civilian Pentagon politicians, instead of worrying about ruining Army morale by trying to make one general tell the truth, if they would instead of that say that we must pick up Army morale by telling every American uniformed man that he will not be deserted. He will not be deserted in a communist prison cell or in any other prison cell throughout this nation.
Songwriter and screenwriter Millard Lampell, one of the original Almanac singers, with Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, was called to testify before Senator McCarthy's Permanent Investigation Subcommittee. He stood on the Fifth Amendment.
The least you're prepared for is that suddenly the clock of your life will turn back. And what you did in the 30s, while I had done these songs in the late 30s, suddenly these songs that had come out of the union organizing movement in the 30s were Ritt and so, well, you want to hear something subversive? Sure. It isn't a lot of people sitting around at some dim, shadowy meeting planning how to take over the White House. It's, this is what they're asking you about. These were songs we wrote during the late 30s, when the unions were organizing, and as a matter of fact, this first one, I think, is the first song I ever worked on with Pete Seeger. And we play them for coal miners and steel workers and well, down in Appalachia, Alabama.
Now, if you want higher wages, let me tell you what to do. You got to talk to the workers in the shop with you. You got to build you a union, got to make it strong. But if you all stick together, boys, it won't be long. You get shorter hours, better working conditions, vacations with pay, take your kids to the seashore. It ain't quite this simple, so I better explain just why you got to ride on the Union basis. If you ain't so the boss.
I listened to this thing and try to remember them talking about this stuff as being subversive and really overthrowing the government with these. And I remember a little cellist I met. She was a Czech woman, very petite, very elegant, and she came from Czechoslovakia, and she was stopped by customs, and they used to have this form they asked you, and when they got to the question, do you wish to overthrow the government of the United States by force and violence? She said, could I?
In every country, communism has conquered. The party membership was small. That's what they want. A small and highly disciplined group of fanatics, backed by thousands of fellow travelers.
You should know if anybody does. Only I wish you'd told me all this before.
I was afraid to, Phil. When I signed my immigration papers, I denied that I was a communist.
And if you try to leave the party, they'll tell the State Department. Have you deported?
I've got so that I don't care about that anymore. But I care about you. And I know what would happen if you would take that card. I don't want it to happen to you now.
Darling, we've got to get away from here.
I couldn't get away from here, Bill. Let me show you.
What did you do after you got out of jail?
I tried to find a job, and I didn't find one very easily. I couldn't find any in Hollywood at all. And I did get a job finally in San Francisco when I managed to bounce by accident into a job at the Hungry Eye, and they needed a light man and offstage announcer and stage manager. I worked there for 7.5 years. It would have been an ideal job for a writer if they had paid a decent salary. But the man paid $80 a week. I got up all the way to $105, I think, after 7 years there. But that's why I had a daytime job reviewing movies for the People's World here, which paid another $50 or $60 a week, because I had this daughter to support still.
I took a job with the King brothers for, I remember, $5,000 to make a picture for them, in order to prove that the American Legion wouldn't boycott my pictures, as they had done during the years that I wasn't allowed to work in Hollywood, and that the American public in general wouldn't arise and react to the fact that I was working in town again. So I did that. I made a picture with them, and then eventually, some months later, Kramer hired me to make a series of pictures for Kramer Productions, and I was sort of off again.
I stayed in New York because friends and others who came back found it so bad. Trumbo went down to Mexico. At least the first few years there was just absolutely impossible. The committee had come back. Hundreds of others were being blacklisted, and we were pariahs. So I stayed in New York. I wrote a couple of plays during that period, and I got my first, through some friend, I got my first work under a pseudonym for some television work. But I worked in New York as a waiter, as a warehouse man. I did all kinds of odd jobs to keep going.
We had formed a thing called the Motion Picture Industry Council. It was dedicated to the public relations of the picture business, not publicity, but to deal with those problems that affected the industry as a whole. It consisted of representatives of every organization, every management group in pictures. And we faced up to this problem of what are we going to do about those people that we ourselves believe are innocent, but that are being persecuted and not being given jobs. We formed a committee. And what we did was go to these people. And we were able to say, well, yes, you've appeared on this list and that list, and associated with this cause, you joined this organization and so forth. Well, the average person would say, good Lord, I joined because of this or that, whatever the proposed or purported cause was. And they say, what do I do? And we'd say, well, look, we can't solve your problem. We can tell you how you can solve your problem. We can give you a list of things to do. And if you do them, you will remove your name from those lists automatically. If you can't do them, because they were things that we knew party discipline would not allow a communist to do.
Could you give us examples of?
Well, to go to the House Committee or to go to the FBI.
Walter Bernstein was one of the many who refused to cooperate with the House Committee or the FBI. To keep working, he wrote scripts under pseudonyms or used the names of other writers who fronted for him. In the fall of 1975, production began on The Front, the first commercial film to deal directly with the Blacklist period. Written by Bernstein and directed by Martin Ritt, who was also blacklisted. The Front stars Woody Allen as a man who lends his name to a blacklisted writer. Zira Mostel co-stars an autobiographical role as a blacklisted comedian.
Oh, you're beautiful.
It's a picture we've been wanting to make, though we never really prepared the script because we had no money. Walter and I had talked about this film for some time. We had a lot of problem with this material. To decide which way to go, we wanted to use some of his own material. And then we were debating whether or not that was the character or that was Zero. In this incident, I do think something like it happened to Z. I think it was one of the big hotels where he went to work and he got 1/10 of his former salary and blew his stack and had to do it anyway. That was the nature of the beast, and that was it.
This is supposed to take place around what, 53, 54?
53.
I am an old vaudevillian, telling jokes till I am sore. Must have told 1,000,000, but I got 1,000,000 more. I'm a cow. I'm a clown. Curtains up, trousers down. I need to be funny, like Sonny Cocaine, in a club, in a show, and the Johnny the Train. When I enter, I entertain, doing anything for a laugh. A laugh, a laugh, anything for a laugh.
News programs asked me what I thought about the hearings, which I think is a stupid question after what I went through there. And I said, instead of being angry, which is not my type, I never get angry! I thought I would be like myself, and I said, I want to thank the House Un-American Activities Committee for letting me get back on television. I'd been blacklisted for 8 years. And they all printed it, went all over the country. It was my first appearance in 8 years. No pay, of course.
The 8 years that I was blacklisted, there were a number of fronts because the situation was very fluid, to say the least, and it was hard to keep someone fronting. They fronted for various reasons. Some did it for money, pay the money. Some were writers who wanted the credits. Others were people, writers or non-writers, who did it out of conviction, out of friendship, and but then had other things to do, couldn't stay with it. So it was always a question of finding somebody.
You couldn't just have another name. You had to have a live body. In case there was a script conference, you weren't allowed to appear physically. You would know one person who hired you. He didn't want anyone else to know. You not only had to have a live body, but you had to have a live body with a series of credits. If I hire Joe Goldberg, who's never written a television show before, somebody is going to say, why are we hiring this guy for a major show? He has no credits. He's never written anything. We can't hire him. So I have to find someone who has credits and who's willing to give me his name and say that he wrote something I wrote. That's the first stage, because I can't even appear. The next stage was completely cynical. Everybody knew that you were working on the job. All you needed was a name to go before the public. I mean, completely cynical because the theory was these people are dangerous, you mustn't hire them. And yet everybody was hiring us, but you can't use your name because that might inflame the public.
The industry's confusion about how to treat its own was apparent. as 3 years in a row the Motion Picture Academy awarded Oscars to blacklisted writers working under pseudonyms.
Mr. Trumbo, did you write The Brave One?
Well, you see, I've been accused of writing many pictures in the last 10 years during the period of the Blacklist, so I've had to make a policy about such questions. My policy is that I modestly refuse either to confirm or to deny. And in this way, I receive just a little bit of credit from almost every good picture that's made. And for some reason, I never get blamed for the scamps.
Scamps?
Oh, you might call turkey.
Aside from any specific titles, then, have you written for motion pictures? Are you writing now?
You mean since the Blacklist was inaugurated in Hollywood? Oh, yes, yes.
You talk about the Blacklist growing out of the 1947 hearings before the Un-American Activities Committee. Is it that formalized, a blacklist with names on it, people who will not be employed?
The studios say there is no blacklist at all. It's a dirty word with them. However, over 250 people have received notices from the studios that they are no longer employable in motion pictures, and I was one of the first. I think it's a blacklist.
Mr. Wheeler, was there in fact a blacklist, to your knowledge?
Oh, not as such. I don't know anybody that typed out a list of names and circulated them around the studios and said these people are not to be hired. I mean, this would be against federal legislation. This would be conspiracy to keep people from becoming employed.
There was definitely a blacklist in Hollywood, no question about it. I remember when I came back and finally was working again at Columbia, I wanted to use a man as a dialogue director. His name had to go through the channels, and they came back to me and said, sorry, you can't use him. And I said, why not? And they said, well, he was not a member of the Communist Party as far as we know, and we don't know, but he had his names on a few things that are questionable, so it would be just safer not to. Now, I think that's reprehensible, and there was nothing I could do to fight it. I don't know how many, not as many as they say, but there were hundreds of people at least who were affected by the blacklist and who lost their means of livelihood in this town. Most of them are back, who are still alive, are back working again, by the way, and are, as it were, in favor. I think there's a reverse blacklist even today now. I think that the liberals who are riding high are going in the opposite direction. I think some of the fellows back then who were on the reactionary side are having a tough time getting jobs now.
The blacklist you so often hear about in following the Waldorf meeting, this did not stem from Hollywood. This stemmed from the American people. They had gotten ahead of Hollywood. And suddenly when millions of Americans in various types of groups simply had lists of performers or people in the picture business and said, look, we're going to tell you this, we're not going to pay money to buy tickets to see a picture that is paying a good living, a better living than we make, to people that we believe are dedicated to the overthrow of this country. Well, now, if you're in the picture business and you're a producer and you're going to invest a few $1 million in a picture, and you've got great nationwide organizations saying we won't buy tickets to see it, you got a little selective with who you put in it.
We were always told that this blacklist didn't exist. And then it turned out that every company, started to put in their contracts, also United Artists, who did Exodus, had in their contract that the legal department has to approve the writers and the actors and whomever you wanted to hire. And why the legal department? I mean, if you would say that they had some artistic reasons against an actor or writer, they could discuss it. Although I had already then, and I have now complete autonomy. I can hire whomever I want to, etc. Anyway, I hired Mr. Trumbo.
So we went to work. And he was reading his copy, walking back and forth, and he'd say, no, there's something not quite right here. I mean, it does not have your flair. It doesn't have genius, that's what I mean. It just somehow lacks genius. that the other scenes have. And we must have that genius. And I said, Otto, for God's sake, if we have every scene equally excellent, do you realize how monotonous this picture is going to be? It will be impossible to sit through. There must be variety. And that's the reason I made the scene this way. He said, oh, paced one more time back, looked at it, he said, tell you what, you make them all excellent and then I will direct unevenly.
I had lunch with Mr. Clement Benjamin of United Artists, and I took them to lunch here at the St. Regis, and I said that I want to give Trumbo credit, you know, official screen credit as Dalton Trumbo. And they said to me, look, you know, there was very much to their credit. We won't stop you. You know, we have nothing we cannot do. You have autonomy in your contract. If you want to give him screen credit, we won't publicly agree with you for certain reasons, but we will not stop you. Do whatever you like.
Otto would say occasionally, now look, I must have better scenes or I'm going to announce that you wrote this. That's what I'll do. I received a call from him one night, and he said, if you get the New York Times, the story broke on page 1 that you wrote Exodus. I said, that means you really hate the script, doesn't it?
Trumbo was probably one of the most prominent film writers in Hollywood. A man of enormous prestige with great credits. And I knew that as the Blacklist before the Un-American Activities Committee, back in the old days, that there'd be people who would break it, as they did with Trumbo in 1960. And this was an individual action on the part of a producer. It generally relaxed things at that time, but it wasn't a common thing. Other people didn't get back until much, much later.
In New York, the winner is Millard Lampell.
Eagle in a Cage, Hallmark Hall of Fame.
Kind of ironic because the only reason I became a writer is because you could wear a sweater all the time. I'd like to thank George Schaefer, not because he's such a good director, but because he was so easy to get along with. No, because he works out of a script, and this is my last remark. For some peculiar reason, and it's going to take me a long time to figure out why, I suppose everybody ought to know here that I was blacklisted for 10 years.
I didn't even know I was going to say it. I had no idea. When I heard my name, suddenly it seemed ridiculous to be standing there with all these people and acting as though nothing had happened in this 10 years. The place went crazy. Everybody began to applaud and cheer and whistle, and because it was now getting to be fashionable to say, I didn't really mean it. It's a hard thing to see lives destroyed because of a false idea. I just think it's a sad thing. It's like Vietnam, and maybe it was the beginning of it. When the country is bit by bit manipulated by a mood, by a feeling, so that they lose sight of what the kind of spirit of independence and originality is. Every time people are afraid of a new idea, every time people are afraid of someone who's outspoken, there's the potential for what ends in a blacklist.
People are out to protect themselves. The people who have property and money, and those were the people who formed the alliance, let's say, want to protect their property and their money. They want security, obviously. To them, communism was a great danger. Because I've heard communists themselves say, I'll never forget one guy who stood in front of the Sunset Towers and said to me, someday I'm going to be living up there and he's going to be living down here. Well, that's the kind of thing that the Hedda Hoppers and the John Waynes and the Ward Bonds heard and believed. Whether they're justified or not, I don't know.
I sort of go back a long way to where I started as a young man. I took a side, and I knew there was an opposite side. Remember, there was an old song called, "Which Side Are You On?" Well, I knew which side I was on, and there was never any doubt about it. And there were people on the other side, and they were going to try to suppress us, all our democratic rights, all our rights of free speech. And so that when it happened, I think I was pretty well prepared for it, because as the Cold War developed after Churchill's speech in Fulton, Missouri in 1946, it seemed pretty clear. The Un-American Activities Committee, new spurt of life at that time, the people in Hollywood, of the Hollywood Alliance, grabbed onto this thing, and it became a big hullabaloo, and it was they who invited the committee out.
It was a confused time, but I don't think there's any blame that can be assessed against anyone. Look, first of all, the American people, they came out of a war in which the Soviet Union was our ally. Came out of what we thought was a time of peace. And then suddenly the Cold War started, and they suddenly saw that the one-time ally was behaving in a manner that had to be construed as hostile to us. And I think all we wanted was peace. I know a lot of young people have been led to believe by some that communism, or that America is aggressive and imperialistic, and I've always had one answer for them. World War II ended, and the whole world was war-ravaged and destroyed. We were the only country with the full industrial power, unharmed by the enemy. We had the greatest military organization the world had ever seen, and we had the bomb, and no one else had it. Now, if we were imperialistic and aggressive, why didn't we take over the world?
Worse than the suffering that any individuals may have had because of the Blacklist, and some who died, as we know, was the damage that was done to our country, and the damage that was done internationally as a result of what was going on in our country. And this committee, and committees like it, such as the McCarthy Committee, were advancing on the fascist front. And those who did not oppose it, whether in silence, out of fear, or who cooperated with it, were helping that advance.
The only way you could cooperate with the committee is to inform. And in no country that I have read the literature, where I have read the literature, can I find an informer as a hero, but yet in this country they try to make a stool pigeon a hero. It doesn't work. And the only reason one informed is the old cliche of the movie where the British soldier shoves with his riding crop the money towards the informer. And that's what all of them did who informed. They got the little money, kept shoving their way. So we were all victims in a sense. If you want to go around your lifetime with the word informer written on your forehead, fine. Also, people have very short memories. They forget who they are. But I won't forget.
I have the feeling that if you give most people in the world a choice between enough food for their children and shelter and clothing in return for their freedom of speech, that they will go for the food, the shelter, and the necessities, and freedom of speech becomes a luxury for which few fight at the most. Men want food, and they want houses, and they wouldn't mind an automobile. If that means that I have to go to jail, they don't care. Let him go.
Although Dalton Trumbo's screen credit on Exodus in 1960 appeared to signal the end of the blacklist, years went by before others regained employment. Some were never to return to the film industry. Some decided to leave the country rather than wait for a change in the political climate. The effects of the blacklist are still being felt by the people who lived through it and by the succeeding generation. Even today, government positions have been denied to children of blacklisted parents. In 1975, many people were still reluctant to talk about this period, and many would not appear in this film, fearing they might jeopardize their careers.
From all of you good workers, good news to you I'll tell of how the good old Union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? My daddy was a miner and I'm a miner's son, and I'll stick with the Union till every battle's won. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? They say in Harlan County there are no neutrals there. You'll either be a Union man or a thug for J.H. Blair. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Oh, workers, can you stand it? Oh, tell me how you can. Will you be a lousy scab or will you be a man?